Hi there, I'm Jim Zub,
And I'm Matt Murray,
and we're here on Forbidden Planet TV.
mother of Mitra.
Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. I am pleased and privileged to be joined by Grim Jim Zub and Merciless Matt Murray, the editorial and writing team on Heroic Signatures and Titan Comics' amazing hit book, justifiably hit book, Conan the Barbarian. How are you, gents?
Well, with an intro like that, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard to feel bad about yourself when you're introduced that way. I'll tell you that much. But I'll try. Believe me.
The grimness is such an inherent part of me, as Matt can tell you.
I can feel it.
It's so funny because I knew that I wanted to give. When Jim and I started talking about the book, I knew that I wanted to give everybody bullpen names. And it's so funny that I gave him Grim Jim Zub because that is the furthest thing from the truth. He's like this ebullient Canadian, hey, chipper happy, and it's like Grim Jim Zub. It's like, yeah,
that's right.
Hey,
I look forward to meeting, more and more Conan fans over the years, and they're just going to be coming in. They're going to be like, "Oh, this guy's going to be just this whiskey tinged throat and just like the hardest nail kind of guy." Yeah, it's fun. It's as we were sort of saying before we started recording here, it's been a real surreal ride to finally get the book out there, into the world and in the hands of readers and retailers and have such an amazing response. It's been it's a privilege, it's a joy, it's an honor.
Very well said, brother. I mean, speaking of whiskey tinged voices, when last we met, the three of us met, it was the final day of Comic-Con, which is when we had the misfortune and the tremendous fortune of doing the Conan the Barbarian panel, which is also up on Forbidden Planet TV, and you can see
my voice sounds very different there. It sounds really like does. I've been gargling toxic waste by that point because you've been going for 5 days straight talking.
You actually had a voice. I didn't.
Yeah,
that's right. It was just sort of ground down to the nub. But what an amazing experience. I did San Diego Comic-Con. A couple of weeks after that, I did Gen Con. I think I just got my voice back and then just smashed it into the ground again on another convention. But that's the nature of the summertime kind of con season and promoting a big project that you're excited about. So
I mean, one thing we were talking about off camera is just what a glorious reception the book actually had. I know we haven't any fans that we've spoken to, but for you guys at Comic-Con, there weren't any celebrities at Comic-Con this year, apart from the mighty Jamie Lee Curtis. But you guys were the celebrities on the Titan booth. You guys were the people everybody wanted to speak to. And that must have felt justifiably amazing.
It's incredible. Conan's got a 90+ year legacy. And so you're seeing really kind of generational response, like people coming, and the number of messages I've gotten since the actual launch in stores where people are talking about, this is the first time I've been to a comic book store in years. This is the first time I've subscribed to a book in, 10, 20 years. I'm back in a big way. I can't believe it. Just that good feeling, those vibes coming from people. People that came by the booth completely unaware there was a new comic series, taking like a flip of a couple pages and being like, well, I got to buy this. That's the ultimate kind of compliment, that we can pull them in from across a room and make them, readers, make them excited to check out what we've got going on. There's no better feeling.
The palpable excitement is a beautiful thing, and it's all credit to you guys. And speaking of you guys, you've both had very interesting career paths to get to this point where you're collaborating together on this wonderful book. Matt, you've had such an interesting career. Do you want to talk a bit about it, mate?
Yeah, sure. Where should I start? Well, I guess in terms of comics, I came to it first as a fan in an organization called the Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art, which is now part of the Society of Illustrators. It's in New York City, and I started volunteering because I met a guy named Jim Salicrup at a convention.
Wow. Yeah.
And I knew Jim Salicrup as a drawing in the back of Marvel Age. Now, if you remember Marvel Age, it's like it cost like 15 cents, and it was just like promotional. It was Wizard before Wizard, and that was like Jim's baby, and it was the only comic I could afford to collect when I was a kid. So I knew this illustration of this dude, and I finally met him. I'm like getting ready to turn 30. And he's like, "You should come volunteer at the Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art." And I was like, "Yes, yes, yes." And in 3 years, I ended up running the organization as the president. Also, there's an associated festival, which is like one of the largest independent comics festivals in the world, one of the most popular. And so I was at Mocha for 3 years, made some connections through Mocha. Jim actually, who was my boss, he was one of the trustees. He actually hired me to help him bring the Smurfs to America.
Wow.
Okay. I'd done an exhibition at the museum about Saturday morning cartoons. And, you know, I grew up in the 80s. So the Smurfs were a huge part of my life. Like my grandmother had to watch the Smurfs to know what I was talking about. Like, cause I would just be like, Smurf, 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 Smurf. So when he actually says my enthusiasm made him pursue the book. So he started importing the books in new English translations, and I worked with him as an editor and a consultant until very recently, until he sold off Paper Cuts. And then I went and worked for Stan Lee for 7 years at Power Entertainment, which was very, very interesting times. I worked on...
That's an interesting point in Stan's life, right?
Yeah, very... yeah, I mean, literally books have been written about it. None of them have gotten it right. And it's not something that I would want to participate in terms of, because it's, you know, it was a bit fraught, but it was it was a great time. It was a great time though, man. I got to work on some international properties like Lucky Man, which was in the UK.
Which, as you know, I'm a big fan of. My whole family are a big fan of. We watched it in real time, brother.
Yeah, wow, man. Thanks. That was probably Pow's biggest hit.
And also there's a Forbidden Planet cameo in the first episode.
I know. I actually had to help coordinate that because I had to find something. We actually filmed it in Meltdown for the interiors, but I know it's like you go into Forbidden Planet and then boom, and you're Meltdown Comics in,
you're in
in
the
LA.
whole of the store. Yeah,
exactly. And I had to actually coordinate that shoot, so that was interesting.
But
so
it's very elegantly done in the show because, you know, the Jimmy Nesbitt character is walking past Forbidden Planet. He looks in at Stan doing a signing, but you've dubbed the dialogue where he's talking. You know, a young lady goes, "Thanks, Stan," but it's an English accent, right? You know, it's very. And unless you knew the store intimately well, you'd never get that it done that. It looks really. I mean, I'm in there every day and it looks good. Do you know what I mean?
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that. So yeah, I worked on Lucky Man. I worked on an anime program called The Reflection. Also at the time, I was working at freelance at Clive Barker's Seraphim, where I helped relaunch Hellraiser as an anthology comic. And then the pandemic happened. And yeah, coming out of the pandemic, a friend of mine called and said, Heroic Signatures is probably looking for you. So you should call these people. And I was like, all right. So I gave Heroic Signatures a call, and
by the way, for those who don't know watching this, Heroic Signatures are the IP owners of Conan. Yeah, so basically the Magnificent Seven of your creative and editorial teams put together by Heroic Signatures, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And they're very, very good dudes.
Yep. It's a company I enjoy working for.
Yeah.
And I work in both comics and prose. I helped get together that recent Conan pastiche novel, Blood of the Serpent. And,
which we published. Yeah, wow, amazing.
Yeah, so, yeah. And I got Rob. That's the first time I got to work with Rob. Rob De La
Rob
Torre
De La
illustrated
Torre.
that. Yeah.
Who we'll be talking about a lot, I'm sure, over the next little bit.
That was kind of an interesting test run working with Rob on that.
So Blood of the Serpent, the links to buy that you can see attached to the base of this conversation. And while you're talking, we'll have magically flashed up the cover for that. So that's a great piece of work.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun to put together.
Yeah.
You know, it was the first pastiche, I believe, in like 20 years.
Yeah. Right
and we have another one coming up next year.
Right
so yeah, we're chugging along.
So Matt, how did you, in that kind of Chris from the Magnificent Seven, Yul Brynner kind of way, how did you put this team together to work on Conan?
Oh God, it was easy probably one of the easiest things in the world because Fred Malmberg, who is my boss at Heroic Signatures, he's the president.
Good dude. Yeah, nice guy.
When he first started talking about we're going to do our own comics because we do co-publish with Titan. He's like, we're going to do our own comics. It's been it's been away for so long, and Marvel, we're moving on from Marvel. And he's like, well, we want you to handle the comics, and we want to start with a Conan the Barbarian monthly book. And we've been speaking to Jim Zub, and we think that he should be the writer. I'm like, well, okay, that's easy enough. So I started talking to Jim, and then Jim gave me some things, some pitches, and some concepts that he was working on, and we worked on them together, trying to get some of my editorial mandates that I'm getting from Bub or just my own ideas, and we kind of started to fold them into what's now the plot of the first year of Conan the Barbarian. And I was like, Jim, well, who do you want to draw this? And he gave me a list about 2 or 3 people. Rob Del Torre's name's on top. I was like, well, that's who you want? He was
Right
like,
at the top of the list.
I went, all right, let's go get him. So
and I was like, it can't possibly be that simple.
I went to Rob, and Rob's a character. Rob is funny. And he's very bright, and he knows exactly what he wants, and he's not afraid to say it. And I respect that. I really do. So I went to Rob, and Rob's, I really don't want to do it. He was like, well, Jim Zub's gonna write. He's like, okay, maybe. And then we hired him to do Blood of the Serpent as kind of a test run for me. And I found it really easy to work with him. It's really easy to work with him because he draws the hell out of anything. He really does. He just makes it pop.
He's top to bottom, really brilliant illustrator. Yeah.
And, even like, I want to see how he'd handle notes and this and that. And I found that we had a pretty decent exchange. And I think that kind of helped warm him up to the idea of doing the book more and wanting to come on and do a monthly, which is, something that he had kind of, he's been in the system now for like 30 something years, man. He's been through the ringer. And people would always put their own expectations and their own, tamping them down and really kind of applying pressure that he didn't like and didn't respond well to artistically.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Rob, chains off, man. And he's like, really? I'm like,
yeah, you be you.
Yeah. And that was it. And then there's the team. That's Jim and Rob, man. Of course, Richard Starkings actually hunted me down.
Absolute legend.
I know this story. Yeah.
Absolute legend.
As you discovered at San Diego, myself and Richard go way back. And awesome. We're born in the same hospital on almost the same day, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. And so the Merseyside massive, it echoes through time. Before we talk about that, because Starkings is such a big Conan fan, it's a dream project for him, and I know he really loves the book. But can we take a step back about your career, Jim? Because you've also had a fascinating road to where you are now.
Yeah. It's so odd to me to be in this position in all the best kind of ways, though. People have said to me, they go, oh, this must be a bucket list project for you. And I go, man, I never even imagined this bucket. It's impossible that I am the writer of Conan the Barbarian. It could not be this way, because I grew up in a little this kind of blue collar car production town east of Toronto here in Canada called Oshawa. I was a big comic book fan growing up, obviously loved collecting the stuff. The first books I started really regularly reading were G.I. Joe and Spider-Man, and then eventually Conan the Barbarian. My older brother, he's 4 years older than me, and he's sort of my proto nerd for all things, sci-fi and fantasy, and especially sword and sorcery, both in terms of fiction, like, the pulps and Robert E. Howard stuff, but also in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, which was a huge kind of a meeting place for us, because it doesn't seem like a big deal when you're older, but when, the difference between being 8 years old and 12 years old is big to kids, right? And so that was our kind of shared language was we'd come together and we'd play Dungeons and Dragons. We'd make our own little fantasy stuff. It made me want to be a storyteller and an entertainer. And I didn't know what form that was going to take. All I knew is I wanted to make stuff. I wanted to build things and entertain people. I actually went to school after high school. I went for classical animation. So I studied and worked in the animation industry for a few years, working on Canadian cartoons and Saturday morning kind of stuff. And then as the industry was shifting over to 3D animation, I was in this, I don't really want to do that. That's not really where I see myself. Just doing some art and illustration, and I'd fallen in with a group of friends who were working at the Udon studio, and they did all sorts of artwork for RPGs and toy design and animation and comic books. And I had loved comic books. I grew up reading them, but I never really saw myself as a comic book creator. And yet right around that same time, I started posting, my own kind of comic book stuff online, or I was doing a web comic 3 times a week that I was putting out there as a bit of a creative outlet when I was doing my animation stuff, because animation's hundreds of people are required to make any piece, there. And I couldn't get, it would be years and years until I would have sort of control of what was being put on the screen. But with comics, you can get a small kind of scrappy group together, or I could put something independently together myself. And so bit by bit, being at the Udon studio, putting my own stuff online, meeting people in the industry, eventually going to San Diego Comic-Con and starting to network and meet people and realize, oh, these creators whose names I've just seen in the credits, almost like, Matt with Jim Salcrup, like these are real people. This is a community. You can plug yourself into this and meet people and put yourself out there, and bit by bit, find yourself on a path. And eventually that led to me launching my own creator-owned book at Image, which was a sword and sorcery comedy series called Skull Kickers. And that was just me trying to channel all that kind of fun sword and sorcery energy kind of on the page. And it was a bit of a love letter to Conan the Barbarian and Dungeons and Dragons. And long story short, thanks to that book and the visibility that it got me, I eventually did a book called Pathfinder that's based on the famous tabletop role-playing game. I did Samurai Jack. I would eventually start doing Dungeons and Dragons comics, and I've been doing them all the way through since 5th edition D&D launched in 2014. And I got the chance to do Conan the Barbarian. The first Conan project that I got to do was thanks to my friend Gail Simone. She did the first kind of crossover between
the brilliant Gail Simone, by the way. I'm like massive Gail Simone fan.
Amazing. She's incredible.
Incredible.
She did a Red Sonja series, and they did the first crossover of those two characters thanks to Dark Horse and Dynamite at that time. And I thought, oh, this is my only chance. I gotta get to write this character who's so cool. It means so much to me. And we did a miniseries, and it was a lot of fun. And then a few years later, I had started doing work at Marvel. I was in the Avengers office, and they let me know that they were getting the rights to Conan the Barbarian back. And they wanted to bring the character into kind of the mainstream kind of Marvel universe as part of that. And I was kind of reticent about it, if I'm being 100% honest, because I know as a hardcore fan, you're like, oh, the sword and sorcery and the superhero stuff. I don't, I love those things, but I don't know that the fandom's going to really respond to it. And the gist of it was, well, if it's not you, it's going to be someone else. It's going to happen. You can get on this train or it can run you over. And I was like, well, I'll do the best damn job I can with it. And I tried to write Conan as solid and as well as I, could for what we did was called Avengers No Road Home. And thankfully, people responded well to it. But my first chance to kind of really, really do my own Conan thing was a Savage Sword story that I did. Marvel had their anthology series that they were doing. It wasn't like the classic black and white. It was this full color book that they were doing. And I pitched the editor on this 3-part story that we called Conan the Gambler. And I thought, this is my last chance. And it's not a co-written thing. It's a solo credit. I get to write my own Conan story. And I kind of put everything I could into it that felt like the pulps, that felt like what I loved about the character and Robert E. Howard, stories that meant so much to me, and kind of dropped the mic and said, I think this is what a good Conan story is. Pat Zerker drew the hell out of it. And what I thought was my last shot at writing Conan caught the eye of, Fred Malmberg at Heroic Signatures. And instead it kind of became an audition. It was like, oh, this guy gets it. What I didn't know at the time is that they were looking for a new Conan writer. And so I had the chance to write some more Conan stuff at Marvel. And almost right from the get-go, we were on shaky ground, not because of anything that we had done wrong, but because of the pandemic. I literally had one issue come out, and then all of a sudden, our book was put on pause for 8 months.
Yeah.
And by the time I came back to it, we were in a totally different spot. The publishing plan was in a different spot, and licensing was in a different spot. And I kind of ran out the clock on the series, did the best I could, and we wrapped it up. And I was like, man, that was a cool experience. I got to write Conan, but I had a lot more ambition. We had done this miniseries called Serpent War, and we were starting to pull in other threads of, you know, the Robert E. Howard characters and the kind of big shared mythos stuff that was there, but we never got to sort of pay it off the way that I felt like we could. And Fred and I stayed in touch. We stayed in touch after it was announced that Marvel was losing the license to Conan. And Fred let me know that Heroic Signatures had some big plans and that they wanted to do something. They wanted to come out swinging with their own kind of publishing plan instead of just a licensing deal. And he said, "Are you still interested in Conan?" And I, of course. But what form would that take? And I thought it was just like, I get to sort of be in the mix, or I'll get to contribute in a broader way. And then the more we talked, I think the more we realized, hey, we're kind of really in alignment on how we see this thing and where it could go. I put together a few proposals. And the next thing I knew, he was saying, like, we really want you to be the, you know, at the sharp tip of the spear and really charging with this thing. And we've hired this guy, Matt, and he's going to be your editor. You know, let's really hammer this sucker out. And I realized how unique an opportunity it was, because most people don't get to write the characters that they love, let alone get a second shot at making such a, you know, a splash with it, let alone head up a publishing line and an initiative that is big and it's broad and it's exciting. And so I just hit the ground running with it. I wanted to make this as kind of if we were going to get this chance, let's make this the dream shot. Let's make this the dream team. And so every time Matt has sort of said, well, what do you want to do? I always kind of swing hard and I go, well, I think Rob's the perfect artist. Well, I think, you know, we can go this far with it. Let's really blow it out and show people what we can do. And thankfully, you know, the fandom has really, really responded. That free comic book day issue was like a stake in the ground. It was sort of like a mission statement, and we came out all guns a-blazing, and people have they see how much we love this stuff and what we want to kind of do, and they're responding in even greater way than we could have imagined. And that is a very very special thing. You know, I don't know how else to put it. It's been absolutely wonderful. The sword and sorcery stuff is deep in my bones. And getting the chance to do this and bust it out on this level has been an absolute blast. And I get to sort of be like 10 years old, but also drink the beer. And that's been kind of nice. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a wonderful outcome. I've mentioned this to you guys before, but at like Titan HQ in London, with the team there, Vivian, Nick, and John, and Ricky, and Will, when we see the pages coming in, it's just everybody started going ballistic when they saw them. And I knew it was going to be good because, as I say, Rich Starkings is a very old friend of mine. I was talking to him on the approach show, and he's like, man, when you see this stuff, you're going to lose it. Just wait. And, you know, I thought, you know, he's not a stranger to hyperbole, neither am I. I thought it might have been overstating
all of us, right?
But but man, it was like opening a door and chucking in like a Sumerian grenade. It's amazing, mate. It's just
it's one of those things too. I've worked on a bunch of projects where you feel good, obviously, about, you know, the end result, or everyone's super proud of the output, and sometimes it's not the right time, or you don't get the right marketing push, or the market can, you know, overlook it, and you feel like, man, I felt like we had something, you know, really, really sparkling, and it just didn't quite attach. And so you always want to put your heart into this stuff, but you're never 100% sure, you know, if people are going to respond or if it's going to have that kind of, you know, next level push. And now being on this roller coaster, and we're really zooming at this moment in time, it feels amazing, but I'm still kind of pinching myself, because you have those moments where you're like, well, sure, I've felt really like I had the best thing ever before, and it didn't respond. And now it's like, it's wild. You know, my email is under siege. I'm getting messages from readers and retailers The social media stuff's been wonderful. The in-person stuff has been just glorious. San Diego and Gen Con were both just like electric, and people coming by generationally, like young readers who are like, I've never read Conan before, but this looks badass, I'm totally on board. Or like people that are old enough to be my uncle or my dad coming by, and they're like, oh man, this takes me way back. And this feels like what it felt like to read Conan as a kid. And that's the best compliment you can give, that you're not just a pastiche, like we're trying to riff on what's been done before, but trying to also that we as modern readers have certain fidelity or expectations that we can also, deliver on, and kind of put it, out there as strong as we can. And the legacy of this stuff means so much to so many people, and us kind of most of all. And so if we're pleasing ourselves as creators and we're putting our all into it, then hopefully that just continues to be the case. And based on what I'm already seeing, like issue 2, issue 3 and beyond, we're in really good shape right now. I don't know how to put, I don't want to just pat myself on the back, but like the book looks absolutely stunning. I get giddy every time I see new stuff coming in from artists.
Jim and I speak every week. Just kind of catch up, check in. Sometimes it's like 5 minutes, sometimes it's like 5 hours. And it depends, but we'll sit down, we'll go over Rob's pages, and we will sit there giggling like children about how fucking fantastic it is. It's like, and then he takes the axe and cuts his face this way, and it's just like, oh my! It's like he just stuck a sword.
Sometimes we can't even wait.
Mouth.
We can't even wait till the meeting. Sometimes, like, we got this weekly scheduled meeting, and every so often we get a piece of art and we just start messaging madly or phoning each other and being like, "Did you see that?" Like it's a really good feeling. That kind of energy and the regularity of those meetings and the ability to just riff and to just go like, okay, state of the state, where are things at? What's going on? Even if you're just checking in, going, everything looks good, let's keep going. It's nice having that FaceTime. It's nice having that kind of ability to bond with each other and know that we're moving and pushing in the same direction, and that, anything that needs to be sort of dealt with, it's going to get, worked out. And the long-term kind of creative plan. I think one of the things I saw, so many of my contemporaries I speak to all the time, and the market right now feels really scared and kind of timid in a lot of ways. And a lot of writers and creative teams aren't getting a lot of track to build big stories. They're being told that they've got these very short kind of commitments. Well, you can do 4 issues, you can do 5 issues, 6 issues, and we'll see how it goes. And I get that from a sales point of view, and I get that from a, publishing point of view, but you don't get big storytelling if someone's got 1 foot out the door. If they constantly have to have their hand on the eject button every single time they build a story, you can't go for the gusto, because you're like, well, at any moment we're just going to have to cut this thing really, really short, and it's going to feel really unsatisfying. And so one of the things that was most exciting for me was when Fred said, we really want long-term kind of planning and myth building and big ideas that you can build up and then pay off over that longer haul. Is that something you feel you can commit to? And I'm just like, that's the dream. That's what you want to be able to do. You want to make your mark on a character in a really good way. You want to be able to make your mark on the storytelling and have that stuff out there as a solid kind of, milestone of creativity in your ideas, and to get artists that they know that they're solid and they're in for the long haul as well. And that was just as exciting as working on Conan, was the idea of, let's really build. Let's build something cool. Let's build something exciting. Let's, bring back lapsed readers. Let's bring new people in the door and show them why, Conan is the original sword and sorcery character. He's the Superman of sword and sorcery, which isn't to say that he's invulnerable and he can fly or all that kind of stuff, but just that he's the character that built the genre.
He's at the
heart. Right. He's the archetype. So many characters are riffing on that pulp, primordial pulp basis of the character. And people tend to, something special happens when you get the chance to do one of these iconic characters. as an artist, as a writer, you feel a deep responsibility to do it to the best of your ability. It's not like I'm phoning it in on other projects, but you feel the weight of that in all the right ways, where you're like, I got to really deliver. I got to make sure that when you put my stuff side by side with some of the biggest and best in the business, that I'm not going to embarrass myself. And so it's a really cool opportunity. It's an amazing creative team. And then working with people like, Rob de la Torre and Jose Villarrubia and Dean White and Richard Starkings, like these people are all putting it out there on the page with all their effort and making it look good, making me look good, making us all really, really proud. And that's the other
dream, day, right? I heard a great analysis and analogy for what you guys are doing, and it was so I was at the Forbidden Planet store in Newcastle. That's the northernmost store at Forbidden Planet store, and Newcastle is a wild city in the north of England. Yeah, and I'm from another wild city in the north of England, but it's got a great energy to it, this place. And when I went there and I spoke to the lads who run that store, Rich and Peter and Steve, the only thing they wanted to talk about when I walked through the door is that Conan comic, you guys have put out. It's amazing. And they watched the panel, they'd seen all the panel, they'd seen you guys talking. But what Steve, who runs the comics department, was saying to me was, it's like, what they've done is like channeled authenticity, in the same way that when Conan first exploded into comics, and it's Roy Thomas, it's Barry Windsor Smith, it's John Buscema, they said that authenticity that Conan had then, that's exactly what, like Matt and Jim and Rob, that's exactly what they've delivered with this comic. And I thought, that's the word, that's what you've captured. It feels absolutely real and true and part of the source material.
And thank you. I mean, that is the best damn compliment. Like I said, because you want it to feel rich and true to the character and to their legacy. And obviously, there's a throwback kind of pulp feel to what we're doing and a Bronze Age kind of comic feel to what we're doing. But it's also with an eye toward, we're telling new stories. We're trying to build up something in that long form kind of storytelling way that I think we can still bring something new to the table, even while acknowledging and hopefully, channeling the best aspects of the past, because it is so good. There's a reason why Conan was one of the best-selling Marvel comics for a long period of time. There's a reason why a lot of the other pulp authors fell away, but Robert E. Howard has stood the test of time. And if you look at that stuff and you go back to those sources and you read them carefully, it becomes inherent, the energy and the excitement and the entertainment quality that's in those books. And so before I work on anything, even when I'm a huge fan of the thing, I try and do a lot of research, not because I want to ape it completely, but I want to sort of understand a through line of why was this so popular? Why is it so badass? Why is it so awesome? The type of language that gets used, the cadence of the stuff, the feel of that pulp kind of energy, and then trying to summon that on the page. And what's made this a really unique opportunity is, I know we talked about this on the panel, but I really want to, build up and make sure people understand the difference. I'm not writing full script for Rob de la Torre. I'm writing this, what we would call Marvel style, the way that Stan wrote the book, his comics in the 60s and 70s, and Roy Thomas, where you're giving an artist an outline. You're saying, here's the scene, here's how many pages it is, here are the big kind of key plot points. You are, as the artist, are trusted to do the number of panels you feel are going to work best. Blow it out big with less panels for the action if you feel that's what's required, or, staccato kind of smaller panels wherever you need. Trust in what the artist can do and their storytelling kind of chops. Now, that's not something that every artist is going to feel comfortable with. But it's the exact kind of thing that Rob, I think, needed to really unleash, what he's capable of on the page. That I'm not here to tell him how many panels he needs in order to execute this action. He's got it in mind. And so when we give him a cool and exciting story to tell, he erupts on the page with the best of this kind of Hal Foster meets John Buscema by way of Frank Frazetta, by way of Rob de la Torre, that it is him. It's his sensibilities and his great sense of light and shadow and his incredible storytelling and that visceral energy and violence that he can put on the page. And then when I come back to dialogue it, I'm not talking about a theoretical. When I'm scripting for most of the artists that I work with, I love that collaborative process, but I'm usually telling them it's this many panels, this happens in this panel, here's the dialogue, and then they're trying to draw their expressions or posing to match that script, what we call full script. In this case, I've got this beautiful finished piece of line art in front of me, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to live up to this thing. I've got to make this soar. And you almost can't overdo it. You can't over Robert E. Howard it when you've got that kind of beautiful artwork in front of you. I was literally doing dialoguing and text the last couple of days this week. And I've got this stuff in front of me and I'm writing out these different versions of the text. And I'm checking and double checking and trying to find that poetic sort of prose-like quality that I can put into it. I'm making sure that I'm not reusing the exact same kind of phrases, or I'm trying to think about one of the things that I think was really brilliant when Roy Thomas started doing the Conan comics. He realized very quickly that sound effects were not appropriate for the character, that you can't put clang, clang, stab, kind of stuff in there. It's not going to have the gravitas that the original pulp stories do. And so most of the time when the character drops into action, you go into the captions and the captions are describing atmosphere. They're describing sensory information, smells and sounds and things that, first of all, makes it feel much more epic and literary. And second of all, it makes you slow down. You're reading through these descriptive things while you're looking at this incredible action on the page. And it feels like a slow-mo kind of incredible movie moment. You're getting wrapped up in all the little nuance of the action as it unfolds in front of you. And that's something that is really challenging because it's a heck of a lot easier just to go bang, crash, stab, whatever. And characters go oof or a lot when they get hit. And I've got to kind of go into it and go, all right, we're going to discuss, the strain of their muscles and the smell of coppery blood in the air and the tension and the weather and like all these other things that are kind of swirling in and around this battle to make you feel like you're in the midst of it. And the first couple of times I did it, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I can write this way. I've never really thought this hard about captions and narrative. But the more you do it and the more you read it, and you're like, no, I'm going to get into the mode. I'm going to try and be like Robert E. Howard and get myself in that headspace and just summon this stuff up and unleash the storm on the page. Because if Rob's doing it, the least I can do is try and live up to what he's got there. And it feels, I don't want to overhype it, but there's no other way to put it. It feels alchemical when it works, man. I finished writing some sequences. And I literally will like go downstairs and I'll get my wife to come up and read a segment. I go, am I nuts? Or is this like, this works, right? And she's just like, you're doing it. It's happening. And I'm just like, okay, I think I'm in the mode. I think I can do this again.
I think like the alchemy of creation is a really good like watchword for what you guys are achieving. And I think all of that is very informatively and candidly and tellingly expressed. I want to use that very deep dive you've just done, which is super informative about your process, to talk about we're just on the cusp after the amazing reaction to issue 1. We're just about to reprint issue 1 and also to publish day and date with that issue 2. So assuming that the people watching this have mostly read issue 1 or mostly have it on their it's at home, they've talked about the process. Guys, what can we expect going into issue 2? If
you want to sprint first, go for it, Matt.
Well, actually, I just wanted to add one thing to the process thing, and it's that I kind of came to a realization, I guess last week, that my job in terms of this team is to create safe spaces to do dangerous things. And
that is such a great expression, mate.
That has kind of been what my role amounted to, and I will continue in that role as long as everybody will have me, because that, I think, giving them the room and giving Jim and Rob the permission to do stuff like we'll be doing in issue 2 and 3 and 4 and beyond, and there's more stuff on the horizon. That's what I'm here to do. Jim's here to tell the story. So Jim, what do you want to tell them about 2 and on?
Right. So our first story arc is called Bound in Black Stone, and that's by design. There's a very famous Robert E. Howard pulp story that's not a Conan story called The Black Stone. And what readers will discover, the more that you dig into Robert E. Howard, he wrote 21, depending on how you measure it, 22 Conan stories that are kind of the canon that we build in and around. But he also wrote all kinds of other pulp stories as well. And he used a lot of shared lexicon and concepts and gods and objects and mythos that he sort of sprinkles in amongst his writing. And in many ways, it's kind of the first shared universe in fiction. It's this incredible, deep and rich and mysterious kind of playground. And in the past, writers like Roy Thomas have used little bits and pieces of it. And we are now kind of plugging into it in I think, a bigger way than has ever been attempted before. And so Bound in Blackstone is really a mandate in terms of coming out roaring and saying, look at how cool this stuff is. Look at what's possible. And so this army of cursed Picts that has attacked in northern Aquilonia and has now made their way into Samaria, they represent bigger, larger forces. And Conan and Brissa, the new Pict character, the scout that we introduced in our first issue, they're going to start to see a wider kind of expanse in terms of danger and what is coming for them and potentially for the entire Hyborian age. And so as much as it is a personal story for Conan, his homeland is in danger. There's this force that he can't fully understand. In an army, he can't just simply cut down. There's bigger things moving, and there's myth making happening on the page. And when you've got someone like Rob, and starting with issue 2, Dean White, delivering the visuals, I think you will believe in kind of the big budget explosion that we've got coming. There's some really quiet moments between Conan and Brissa. They talk about the things that drive them. Conan talks about, Crom and the god of the mountain and the mentality that Sumerians have related to their god. But there's also some visceral, incredible action. And we are setting the table for a feast of really cool adventure and action and danger. And I don't know how to say this. I think issue 2 is more beautiful than issue 1. I think it's got some really incredible moments, some absolutely stunning vistas. And issue 3 feels like we're, pushing it higher and higher. We're just going for the gusto. If this is the $300 million movie of sword and sorcery on the comic book page, then so be it. Let's just go for the fences.
Mate, that's supremely well said, and everybody who's channeled into that and enjoyed that snapshot of what's happening in 2, 3 and beyond, issue 2 and issue 3 and beyond can be pre-ordered from the links attached to this conversation. And gents, before we go, because I know this announcement really killed when you made it at San Diego, let's talk a bit about Savage Sword of Conan.
Oh heavens, is that happening again?
Yeah,
oh,
Matt,
geez.
You got to talk about this. This is your baby.
Yeah. When I started to ease into this position at Heroic Signatures, and we started talking about the comics and growing the line. If I go a little bit back to what Jim was talking about with Black Stone, basically I listen to Robert E. Howard stories every morning when I'm getting my 10,000 steps in, moving myself around. And I listened to basically his entire like every book on tape multiple times at this point. And that's when I realized that, wait a minute, the Black Stone, it's not just a story, it's an element that's in every one of his stories. It's in his weird westerns. It's this magical MacGuffin. And when I was told, hey, look, you need an overriding arc for the first year, and I just went, it's Black Stone. Like, what? Black Stone. You can use it to time travel. You can use it to make zombies. That's it. We can do whatever we want. so that's where that comes in. And then in terms of doing whatever you want, when I took on the role, I like to go into comic shops and talk to people and talk to customers and retailers, and every time Savage Sword of Conan comes up, it's this vaulted memory piece that everybody says that that's how they connected to Conan, or that's what they think of. They think of their older brother or them sneaking, ooh, boobies, ooh, blood. As
oversized,
children,
black and white, forbidden fruit.
Yeah. And it's not just the storytelling, it's that whole package. So I started pitching the idea to my bosses, and then we started discussing it with Titan, and it's a process because it's a difficult thing to try to sell in this environment, in current retailing
the form factor is very unusual in terms of current publishing.
Yeah,
it's not something that the average kind of retailer thinks about and goes, great, black and white, let's go, oversized black and white, let's do it.
I'm going to be able to put less of these things out, kind of thing, right? So there's that push and pull, but I mean, my draw to it is it's an anthology. It allows different kinds of storytelling. And that black and white format, I think, really kind of helps the imagination more. And I think it allows artists sometimes to be more themselves.
And so many of the artists, the classic artists cut loose. When you look at Alcala inking Buscema and just like Ernie Chan and you just this murderer's row of artists who kind of found themselves as they worked on Savage Sword, whether they were adapting classic stories or they were creating new material in there. The strength of their storytelling, because you can't rely on color, you have to make this chiaroscuro kind of work for you. You have to make the texture work. You have to make the storytelling incredibly clear and clean and potent. And like Conan itself, it brought the best out of a lot of people. And I think that there's a market that's hungry for it. The same kind of market that buys these artist editions where you see the visceral line art of the original work, or that feeling of getting to a primal kind of storytelling base. Every time we've talked to people, and before the announcement, when Matt was approaching artists and writers and saying, man, we're going to do it old school black and white, they could not get enough. They were they were on board. We didn't even have to go into the details. They wanted to be a part of it.
It's funny because I had some as we were trying to grow the line, with Titan and figure out what our next steps are beyond Conan the Barbarian and into the greater Howardverse and stuff like that, or even just reaching out and be like, hey, I need a cover or this or that. I have had a lot of doors slammed in my face. I've had a lot of great opportunity too, man. We got some amazing people who've done covers for us. And there's a lot of people who are at the door knocking, want to come in and have some fun in the sandbox. But I had a lot of doors shut in my face. And then once everybody agreed to let me try this little experiment out, all of a sudden people are emailing me being like, wait, can I do that? I was like, oh, now you want to talk. Now you want to, okay.
I mean, it doesn't hurt having the killer launch and the killer announcement at San Diego. That's for sure. I mean, even when we were there were some artists who came over to the table and to the booth and they were chatting with us, people that I've known for quite a while. And I was like, I don't know if we could get so-and-so. And then all of a sudden they're coming to us and they're just like, I just heard you guys are doing Savage Sword. And you're like, there's a legacy there. There's a potency there. Let's, let's really do something cool.
And,
please carry on.
Jim actually, even though this will be handled by other writers and artists, Jim's going to have a story, but Jim, I really look at Jim as a creative partner in this. Jim's kind of he's my Conan showrunner. And if I hit an impasse or if I need an idea, I'll just bounce something off him during our weekly chats. And even though my name is on the book as editor in both of them, I mean, Jim is probably the driving force behind this. And with Savage Sword, maybe a little bit lesser because I need him focused on the Barbarian.
Right.
But, one of the things that he and I talked about is that we want to create the Savage Sword that you think you remember. Because if you look at some of those old books, man, it's like it is some hokey nonsense. But you know, the patina of the past kind of.
But when it worked, you know, and this is the thing. I think a lot of the Bronze Age, I think a lot of the Silver Age, you remember the hits and you forget the misses, right? Yeah. You could say that the biggest artists and the biggest names in those eras, every time, whether it's the 70s, 80s, 90s, you remember the biggest names of it. But there were a lot of journeyman kind of things coming out, whether that's in Savage Sword or other magazine stuff or other books coming out from publishers. And it's like our job is to take the best qualities of it and to distill it down, to like just boil it down to what made it so awesome. What do you remember? Exactly like what Matt said. What do you remember about it being so awesome, and how do we put that into every damn issue so that it is the pure stuff, as pure as we can get it, and the excitement and the visceral kind of quality that those stories are able to summon in us, and that we remember kind of better than reality almost. That's what's so cool about it.
I think that point is so incredibly well made, because there can be no doubt that Savage Sword of Conan is the greatest black and white magazine comic of all time. The second greatest black and white magazine comic of all time is Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And if you go back and read Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, it does not always stack up to that glorious memory of seeing those amazing, like, Bob Layton covers or whatever, you know, but the whole package, they're reading the text pieces about samurai movies, and it's similarly reading the text pieces about Robert E. Howard and Savage Sword. That's the trip, that's the journey, and what you guys are focusing on, which is to deliver the memory and make it better and make that glorious memory experience. And
I don't think that we're better than the classics. Like, I don't think that we're better than, you know, the biggest, the best, the creators that have worked on this stuff. I don't have any kind of assumption of that sort of ego, but also to be able to look very carefully and go, okay, which modern artists exemplify those kind of qualities? Which modern writers have got not just, you know, an idea, but also a lot of passion and excitement for that kind of collaborative process to make something really cool and to put their all out there on the page, so that we're going to make something, you know, that's what the comic creation is all about. Really good collaboration, finding great collaborators, finding people that want to make this stuff and make their mark. And that every time it comes out, we get incredibly excited. We feel very privileged and, you know, pumped for everything still yet to come. And it just keeps happening every time Matt sends me, oh, you got to check out this cover we just got. He just sent me one a couple of days ago, and he couldn't wait, just sends it to me, and my jaw's dropping, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is gonna be incredible. We were already getting pinups, we were already getting pages for Savage Sword stories, and how good do those look? And everyone that's doing it is doing it at a level that, you know, that you want to see, like everyone firing on all cylinders.
Well said, very well said. And guys, you know, very well done on what you've delivered. It's a supreme piece of comics that we're all honoured to be involved in. Sorry, carry on. No, it's a fact, mate. And for everybody watching this, once again, Conan the Barbarian 2 will be out at the end of August. You can order it from the links attached to the video. Savage Sword of Conan will be out next year, and I just can't wait to see that.
February 2024.
Bring it on.
You know what's, and it's crazy. Yeah. You know, we were at San Diego last year and we announced the creative team for Conan the Barbarian. And I thought, man, 12 months. God, feels like it's going to take forever. And it was just like we turned our head and all of a sudden it was out there. So I know February sounds like a long time, but it's not. When it comes to production, when it comes to getting all this stuff pulled together, we're going to just turn around and it's going to be there in your hands. So be pumped, be excited. You know, we delivered the goods on Conan the Barbarian. It's going to be coming out monthly. It's going to blow your hair back every single month, and have no doubt that Savage Sword is going to do the same thing.
Amen to that, mate. And you have been watching in Sinatra Orange, Grim Jim Zub, and in Smurf Blue, Merciless Matt Murray. And it's always such a pleasure talking to you guys. Always such a pleasure, you know, luxuriating in your work. And thanks for joining me, guys.
Abominable Andrew Sumner, thank you.
Thank you for having us. And
bring it on. Yeah, can't wait for issue 2, lads. It'd be fantastic.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.